Hello humans, it's your host Kory, and before we get into this week's episode, I just wanted to take a moment to thank my patrons so much. I'm so grateful to you guys that you continue to support me and the show. Without that support, I would not be able to continue to do what I love doing each week, putting these episodes out for you guys free into the world. And so you make that possible, and I just really wanted to make sure that you knew how important you were to that process. And so thank you so much for your continued support of me and the show. And now we can jump into this week's episode. Welcome to A Well Cared For Human, the podcast that tries to convince you that you are 100% normal and an even better than okay example of the human species, despite the fact that sometimes we feel like the craziest, most incapable, or worthless creatures on the face of this planet. I'm Kory, an author, a creative, and the host of the show. Whatever you're bringing to the table today, I hope this episode proves to be a dose of inspiration for you on your quest to become a well-cared-for human. You can find the episode show notes, your free wellness blueprint, and more at awellcaredforhuman.com. And as always, thank you for listening. Hello humans, it's your host Kory, and this week we're going to talk about innate worth. Now, the term innate worth might be somewhat vague. I don't think many of us walk around just thinking about what is my innate worth. That would be odd. But what you might be really clearly connected to is this feeling that I'm so far behind. Like, I thought that I would be in a different place. I thought that I would have achieved more. I'm not measuring up or comparing to this person, to my sister-in-law, to my co-workers, to my insert whomever your standard of success is. And so that feeling of behindness, that is intimately connected to our sense of innate worth. Now, why is that true? And that's because if you felt like you had innate worth, meaning that you don't need to do anything to deserve to be here, to deserve to be alive, to deserve to have a life even, if you felt that way intimately, completely, you would not feel like you had something to prove, that you had to achieve enough or be enough or succeed in all these different ways in order to be valuable as a human being. And so they're deeply connected. The feeling of behindness indicates or points to a lack of innate self-worth. Now, what creates this feeling of behindness? What sabotages our sense of innate worth? Well, there's many different sources that can come from the lack of innate worth. It could either be that there are the social or cultural pressures. Now, I can only talk about American culture, obviously, as I am American. I don't know about all the different cultures in the world and how they impact people who live in them. But what I can tell you is that in America, we have a really strong emphasis on this whole hustle culture, on getting our work done. A lot of us, our identity or our sense of well-being or our sense of worth is connected to our work and our achievements and what we accomplish. And so definitely there is this cultural pressure in America to get more done, to be those hustlers, to get that American dream, so to speak. So for us, it's definitely social and cultural pressure. But it doesn't have to be just social and cultural pressure. It could also just be a natural sense of perfectionism. Some of us really feel that we have to be perfect in order to measure up, in order to be worthy. And so if we don't feel that we are perfect, which is impossible. In fact, I have a whole episode on perfectionism, so please go listen to that if that's something that you struggle with. But if we are struggling with perfectionism, that can create that sense of we're not worthy, that we are not doing enough, that we're not achieving enough because we're focusing on that sense of lack. It could also be experiences from your childhood. So if you were brought up in a home that really emphasized achievement, you might struggle to feel like you have worth as a human being just for existing. So for example, in my household, I've talked quite a bit about what it was like being raised by my narcissistic father. This was not a problem in my mother's household. My mother always emphasized that I had worth just existing. She was always very proud of me. She always loved me very much. She did not convey these messages at all. But in my father's household, with his narcissistic conditioning, he was very inclined to emphasize that I only had worth based on how good I made him look. Like, how good were my grades? How much did I achieve? So the only time that I would get praise from him, for example, is if I got a master's degree. When I got my master's degree, he was like, oh yeah, you're smart. You get that from me. You get that drive, that achievement from me. And so anytime I wanted to be validated by him or to be affirmed by him in any way, I had to secure some kind of achievement in order to get that sense of worth from him. Otherwise, he was really, like most narcissistic parents, he would emphasize my flaws, how I didn't measure up, how I wasn't good enough. And so there was definitely no messaging about how I had innate worth as a human being. So it was very much tied to that sense of achievement. And was I doing enough to earn his affection, to earn his praise, his love, this sense of validation of my worthiness from him. So it could be social, cultural, it could be within your own family or your upbringing. It can be a sense of perfectionism. It could also be that you rush past your achievements too quickly. Now, in his TED Talk, Sean Achor talks about how we move the post for happiness, the goalposts. So imagine that you have in your mind a goal and you tell yourself, I'll just be happy, I'll be worth it, I will be a successful human being if I meet this criteria. And then when we get there, we work hard and we achieve that already probably overly ambitious set of goals. We get there, and as soon as we reach it, we go, no, this isn't good enough, and we move it to the next goalpost. And so we keep moving that, let's say, finish line further and further back. And as we do that, we're never taking the time to celebrate any achievement or a sense of accomplishment that we had. And so when we continuously dismiss our achievements, it's also creating this feeling of having low self-worth, because it's like, even if you did something, you're not even proud that you did it. So it's like, that didn't matter. Like, that didn't matter. What I achieved, it didn't matter. And so it's reinforcing this narrative that you're not good enough, that even when you do achieve amazing things, they're not good enough. And so that dismissal prematurely of your successes, that can create that too. Now, you might also have some mental health issues that create this feeling of low self-worth, low self-esteem. I talked about self-esteem last week, so there's a little bit of overlap there. But this idea that if you have a lot of negative self-talk, if you have a lot of anxiety or depression, for example, or low self-worth, low self-confidence, your mind's going to be constantly telling you, you're not good enough, you're not measuring up, you're not as good as so-and-so, that comparisonitis, this doesn't mean anything, you need to get this together, what are you even doing with your life? And so that internal struggle can really bring us down too, and create that compounded feeling of being behind, of having low innate worth. It really just depends on who you are and what you're going through to let us know which aspects of this are kind of creating this feeling of being left behind for you. But in all cases, it is that lack of innate worth that you just deserve to be here. You deserve to be here. In case anyone told you, let me be the first to tell you, you deserve to be here. You don't have to achieve anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be this amazing person. You deserve to be here just as you are. And that's really important for many of us to hear. And I don't think we hear it enough. I think that's why we all have this feeling. So if you feel behind, that's the connection between your sense of innate worth. And there's one other thing I didn't really consider, which is this idea that it might just be existential crisis. So if you're someone like me who has a tendency to get kind of wrapped up in these bigger scheme of things, like, what does it all mean? Why are we here? What's happening? Then that can also create that lack of self-worth. Like, does it even have any meaning? What is the purpose of life? So that can also create that sense of confusion about, what does it all mean? What am I doing? And so if that's also part of it, maybe don't think so much. That's always my problem, is that I'm thinking too much. That's what gets me into trouble. So maybe don't think so much, and that would naturally decrease a little bit. But existential crises aside, what can you do to work with your lack of innate worth? So if you're struggling with having that sense of innate worth, if you're always feeling like you're far behind, and I totally get it, because when I turned 40, I really got hit with this. I thought I was doing pretty good in life, but there was something about turning 40 years old, and it was just like, what am I even doing? Am I far enough along? It just really hit me. And so I had this sense that, wow, I really need to get it together, even though it's not true. Again, none of us are really in a race. We just get to be here. There's no finish line. If there is, we're making it, and then we're changing where it is, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, when I turned 40, it really hit me that like I was halfway through my life. Probably, I mean, we never know when we're gonna die, but statistically, I'm probably halfway through, and so it's like, well, did I achieve what I wanted to do so far? Am I doing what I wanted with my life? So it just really like hit me. And I think for a lot of women also, when we get that big 40 birthday, we're like, wow, I am old. What am I doing? And so, yeah, so it hit me when I turned 40. And so I really had to think about some of these things. But as far as working with your sense of innate worth in the context of your 4 pillars and like, how do I be healthy and happy? How do I love myself as I am now? How do I get rid of any of this perfectionism, comparisonitis? Really go back to your core strategy. Now, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know that my 3 core principles of how you work with yourself, how you love yourself, essentially, is you have to focus on how you think about yourself, how you speak about yourself, and how you act towards yourself. That's my I can't make a Venn diagram with just my 2 hands, but you can imagine how you think about yourself, how you talk about yourself, and how you act towards yourself. So how you think about yourself, again, working with that negative internal self-talk, like, are you really beating yourself up? Are you really giving yourself a hard time? Are you really comparing yourself to others? Are you making it a really dark and difficult place in your head when you think about yourself and how you've lived? Is there any self-compassion there about where you are now or who you are? Is there any self-love? Like, do you care for yourself now as you are? And so looking at those thoughts, can you see your own value as a human being as you are now, today? Now, how you speak, one of the things that you could try are mantras. So, for example, one of the mantras that I would use in this instance is that, again, closer to my 40th birthday, when I would start feeling like, oh my God, what am I even doing with my life? What have I done with the first 40 years? When I started to have that panic, I would just say, there is no race. There's no such thing as a race. I'm not in a race. There's no race. And so that's a mantra, like, there is no race. There is no finish line. There is no race. There is no finish line. You would just say that to yourself, have something pithy but powerful, meaning that the words really resonate with you. Pithy is good, like short and sweet, because it's easier to say. Powerful, though, is like you have to feel that resonance in your chest. Like when you say the words, that has to feel somewhat true for you. And if it doesn't, then the sentence itself needs to be revised a little bit. But pithy but powerful. There is no race, there is no finish line. And then I could say that to myself every time the fear came up, anytime these thoughts came up, I could use this mantra to dispel those thoughts. And so thinking about how you speak to yourself as well. There is no race, there is no finish line. Also, if you're speaking to yourself about yourself to other people, so if you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't even know what I'm doing with my life. Like, I don't even know who I am. I don't think I'm going to be able to achieve that. If you're really speaking poorly of yourself to other people, first of all, I'm sure that's making them really uncomfortable. I never know what to say or do when people start bashing themselves in front of me. I'm like, no, please don't. This is unpleasant to watch you do this to yourself. But also, just your brain hears that. Like, you hear yourself saying that. And there's no one's voice or opinion that you value more, that you take to heart more quickly than your own. So if you're saying terrible things about you and you're hearing yourself say that, you're more likely to believe them. And we don't want to believe these terrible things about ourselves. So definitely work on correcting how you speak. And I know that sometimes speech is like a compulsive thing. Like, it's out of our mouth before we think about it. So this also will require that we continue to work on building our awareness so that we can slow it down. The whole think before you speak. We can't think before we speak if we don't know how to pause. And we can't pause unless we are practicing awareness. So these are all skills that we have to continue to develop over time. It's not just going to happen overnight. And then thinking about how you act towards yourself. So think, speak, and then act towards yourself. Doing the self-care tasks, and let me give you a little bit more context for this. So we talked about how the 4 pillars, your body, your mind and emotions, your spirit, your connections with others, those 4 pillars are your backbone for your wellness. Now, with your 4 pillars, self-care are the tasks you do to build that relationship, because your well-being is a relationship, and it's a relationship you have to build. So every self-care task is applied to one of these areas, towards your body, your mind and emotions, your spirit, your sense of joy and connections. It's applied to one of these areas in order to build that relationship. Now, when you're building that relationship and you're practicing these aspects of self-care, what you're also doing is you're also conveying to yourself, I matter enough as I am to take care of me. This is especially connected to the idea of not doing self-care as self-punishment. So if you're someone who only does self-care as a form of self-punishment, please go listen to my episode about why that is terrible. How that's never going to make you feel better. You're never going to feel like you're healing. You're never going to feel like your self-care that you actually have time to do, because some of us really struggle with even the time. You find the time to do the self-care and you can't even get the benefits of it if you're doing self-care as self-punishment. And so self-punishment means that, for example, and this is just the easiest example, but it doesn't necessarily have to be within the body pillar, which is that you say, I'm going to eat better because I'm too fat, because I hate the way I look, because I need to exercise more, because I need to get into shape. If you're doing something for yourself from this lens of, I have to do this because there's something wrong with me, then that's going to create this sense of not ever measuring up, which compounds that lack of self-worth also. So we definitely want to make sure that the self-care tasks that we do are done in such a way that they're accumulating those positive effects, that we're not doing it as a form of self-punishment, that we're doing it to convey the idea that I am worthy of being taken care of, I am worthy of investing in. And so that will also bolster that sense of innate worth. Now, in addition to working on the thought, speech, and action, other things that you can do is have boundaries in place. Now, boundaries are going to be both for yourself internally and for others externally. Internally, it's keeping that distance between the negative thoughts and yourself. So when you catch yourself saying something terrible about yourself, for example, you have to be like, no, that's not allowed. Like, we're not going to do that. That is a non-negotiable. That's not acceptable. So you also have to protect yourself from your own negativity. So that's the internal boundary. But then externally, if there are people around you in your life who are bringing down your sense of innate worth, they're going to be compounding that feeling that you're not measuring up, that you're behind, that you're failing at this race called life. Now, if you have someone like that in your life, I'm always just like, get rid of them. But I understand that it's not so easy, right? Sometimes it's somebody that we really love or that we really care about, and we don't want to just cut them out completely. And so you'll need to look at other ways to kind of control those interactions. You could have a direct conversation and be like, when you say these things, that really hurts me and I don't want you to do it anymore. And if they're a loving person who's worthy of your time and attention, hopefully they will immediately agree and start working on their behavior, which would be, that would be the chef's kiss, best idea, best case scenario, right? But it's not always that simple. And so you can just try to control things on your end, like maybe limit your exposure to this person, only see them for short amounts of time, or if you have short phone calls, or only text with them, whatever it is, but controlling the environment a little bit more so they don't have as many opportunities to diminish your self-worth. And so that would be very important. In addition to the boundaries work and the mantras and working on how we think about ourselves, we can also look at, again, celebrating the wins more, taking those moments to actually pause and absorb the fact that we just succeeded at something will make us have to recognize that actually we are doing things, we are succeeding. Why wouldn't you feel behind if you never celebrated anything that you did? Like if you just blew past your milestones so quickly that you never recognized that actually you were achieving this, this, and this, like of course you're always going to feel behind because you're not even seeing the amazing things that you're doing. So absolutely stop and take a moment to pause, even if it's literally just 5 minutes. If that's all you can give yourself 5 minutes. I have recently been liking to celebrate my wins with caramel apples. There's a place near my house here. It's like this kind of bougie grocery store, and they make these really amazing, huge gourmet caramel apples. So I like to celebrate my wins with eating a caramel apple. My dentist probably won't appreciate that, but whatever makes it feel like a success for you, however you want to celebrate it. It doesn't always need to be food motivated. I don't want to drive anyone into any bad habits, but something that makes it feel special for you, do that so that you can take a moment to celebrate your win. Also, think about what matters to you. So you decide what makes living worth it, right? What is it that you need to do or to experience to make it feel like you have arrived or that you've succeeded? So a lot of us, our innate worth, especially when it's tied to our work and what we're contributing to others, there's kind of this focus on other people. And we start to lose sight of what actually matters to us. What do we really care about? And the sense is that we need to focus on what's really important to us in order to feel fulfilled in life, right? In order to feel fulfilled, you need to have a clear sense of the things that resonate with you, not the things that you do just for other people. Now, in order to do that, we have to kind of look at our own values, like what lights us up. The exercise I like to do for this to kind of help cultivate that feeling is if I imagine that I'm about to die. I know it's so morbid, but I imagine I'm about to die, like hopefully late in life, in my bed, in my 80s. I'm old. I've lived a nice, lovely life. When I'm about to die, in bed in my 80s, I just ask myself, what would I have done that would make me feel like this whole thing was worth it? Like, what did I do that made everything feel like, yes, this was exactly what I wanted to get out of life. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Is it a particular achievement? Is it a particular experience? Was it living a certain way? What was it? What was the one thing that made me feel like this whole mess called life? I think we can all agree that it's somewhat messy, right? This whole beautiful mess of a thing called life. What did I want to get out of it? And then let that be the thing that I strive for. If I have to hustle, so to speak, I'm doing air quotes, hustle for something, let it be something that actually matters to me, and make sure that it matters to me, not to other people. So not only do I focus on that, but just the sense of what would have made it worth it for me. And I'm the one who gets to say what that is. No one else gets to say what that is. And so lastly, you can also think about cultivating gratitude for yourself. Gratitude is kind of nebulous. Like, how do you practice gratitude for yourself? I do it in a lot of different ways. I write gratitude letters to myself every week. I literally get a note card, like a thank you card, and I write out things I'm grateful for to myself. It's almost like a love letter, actually. And I write a letter to me about the things I'm grateful for about myself. I seal it up. I put it on my bookshelf with all the other ones that I've written each week. I have like 70 something at this point, so I've been doing it for a minute, longer than a year. So yeah, I've been doing it for a while. Now, in addition to the gratitude letters each week, I have a daily gratitude list. So when I get up in the morning, I have a notebook, just a small little flip notebook, and I just write out the things I'm really grateful for, and I have a moment to appreciate that. A lot of them are about me. Like, I'm grateful, for example, that I take my walks every day, that I'm keeping myself healthy. That's just one example from the list. I'm grateful that I got my new dog, Max. I love him. He brings me so much joy. And so stuff like that. So you just put the things that you're grateful for on the list. You can do that as well. And just a sense of appreciation for yourself will also bolster that sense that, you are great as you are. You're great as you are. In case no one told you, let me tell you, you are great as you are. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. You deserve to be here as you are, period. It's just going to be about convincing yourself that that's true, and all these little tricks and things that we do to try to convince ourselves. Essentially, if you feel like you're behind in life, it's because you're focused a lot on these external pressures of you're supposed to have done certain things, achieved certain things. There's this cultural thing going on, this hustle culture, particularly if you're in America. If that is driving you crazy, so to speak, you have the opportunity to step away from that and to focus more on developing your own innate worth separate from that, so that no matter what happens, you don't feel like you're caught in this race. You can just appreciate yourself and the time that you have here and come to realize, as I hope you will, that you are an amazing person just as you are. And that's it for today, dear human. As always, I hope you found this episode useful, and if you did, and when you would like to write into the show, maybe let me know about something that you're dealing with that you'd like me to do an episode on. I always love hearing from you guys, so you can connect with me through any of my social media, or you can email me at Kory@koryamstrom.com. Otherwise, I will be back next week with another episode of A Well Cared For Human, and until then, please take good care of you. This episode of A Well Cared For Human was written and produced by me, Kory Marie. The music was by Late Night Feeler and Esther Abrami. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider visiting my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get early ad-free access to the episodes, as well as a monthly patrons-only Q&A, bonus videos, and more. Not to mention that your Patreon support lets me know that you find value in the show and want it to continue. You can find me on Patreon by visiting www.patreon.com/Kory Marie. If you can't support the show financially, that is okay. You can still subscribe to the show, leave a review of the show, and recommend the show to your friends, not just the neurotic ones. All of this helps so much. And as always, thank you for listening.